Scott's Geography Notebook.
Twice
Da, da, da.
In the hydrologic model, we are thinking a little bit, about where the water is. But what we're also thinking a lot about is where the process of going from one location to another, right? So we have our drawing here of our hydrologic model. But in essence, we're going to have three different sort of sections to it, right? We're going to have this area at the very top. This is our atmosphere. The atmosphere is there. Then we come down a little bit more and we have our surface. And I'm going to include something in here called the subsurface. That's going to be like the soil, another thing like that. So any water that's sitting on the surface in our rivers and streams, oceans and lakes, and a little bit having to do with that soil. And then if we go down deep enough, then we get down here into our groundwater. Right, and that's going to be where we get a lot of our water from. Cool. So now what we want to do is we want to talk about the processes or the movement of water from one location to another. Anytime we're looking at water falling from the sky in the form of rain or sleet or a snow or hail or any other type of stuff that's going to be falling from the sky, coming from the atmosphere down to the surface, we call that precipitation. Precipitation. Okay, now, sometimes we'll say precip, and other times I'm going to go abbreviate with PPT, precipitation. Good, that's going to be going from the atmosphere down to the surface is through our PPT. Now, how does the water go back up? Right? From the surface up to the atmosphere. Well, one process that we're going to start to see is either water that is on open water or water that's just sitting on the surface. That water can go up through a process called evaporation. So water will get into a warm area and it starts to evaporate. It absorbs that solar energy and changes phase. Now there's one other way that we can have our water going up. That is going to be going from the soil up through the plant, out to the leaf, and then evaporating off of the leaf. So any evaporation off the surface of a plant, that can happen. So we could have this from the grass, from the trees, and we call that transpiration. Okay. Now, if we were to take evaporation and transpiration and try to say them together all the time, it gets really, really long. So what they've done is they've taken both terms, have combined them together to be evapotranspiration. Evapotranspiration. I'll try to write it a little bit neater over here. Let's see what we have. Going from the surface, subsurface. Evapotranspiration. Beautiful. Okay, well that takes care of our atmosphere to the surface and our surface up to the atmosphere. Right? What about this groundwater? Okay, well water does start to pool on the surface, right? So if we get enough rain, for example, coming down here in the mountains, one thing that it can do is that we can have water going from one location on the surface to another one, and this is referred to as runoff. It isn't that it really goes to a different part of the hydrologic model. It just goes like from the surface, runs off, and maybe ends up in a lake or in an ocean. Okay, so cool. So that's going to be from spot to spot. Okay, so the rain is going to come down. Let's say we're talking about rain. And it's going to be getting the soils moist. And we're going to start to get some buildup of soil moisture there. But eventually, the soil can't hold any more moisture. And so either we start to get runoff, or what starts to happen is that water starts to do one of two things. You can call it percolation or infiltration. Okay, so percolating, sort of like a coffee percolator. It takes the hot water and has it run through the coffee beans. Okay, same thing's happening here, right? It's just going to be going down, 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 and down until it gets to this layer of bedrock. Or maybe it gets down here to this layer of an impenetrable layer, a layer that the water can't pass through. It just starts to kind of fill this up. Now, there are other videos where I talk a lot more about this groundwater and do a better job at doing it than what we have right here. But this is going to be that process, percolation or infiltration. So going from the surface down to the groundwater, I'm just going to go with filtration. I also like that term because it suggests that it actually gets filtered a little bit as it's going down through there. Okay, so we have our little model here: evapotranspiration, precipitation, infiltration. What about going from the groundwater up to the surface? Well, sometimes we're going to be seeing that. Sometimes we have natural springs. Okay, and so it might just be flowing out from a particular spot. So springs, and I should be doing that in blue, right? And so we have a little pool of water that's kind of coming up out of there. The other way that's probably more common is we dig a hole down into there, and then we pump that water up, and we call this little guy a little wishing well? No, we just call it a regular well, but I like to make them little wishing wells. Okay, then I send a little bucket down there. Good, so that's going to be wells. So the way that we bring our groundwater up to our surface and subsurface is going to be through springs. That's going to be a little bit more natural. And wells. And we do that a lot to get that groundwater up out of the ground. Okay, so we have our atmosphere, our surface and subsurface, and our groundwater. We have precipitation coming down. We have evaporation and transpiration, or evapotranspiration, coming up. We have runoff going from spot to spot. Good. We have infiltration of the water coming from the surface down and kind of just filling in this big, the voids, the empty spots in between all of the soil particles. Infiltration that builds our groundwater. And then to get the water back up, we do that through our wells or naturally through our springs.